Hello guys, this is your friend Naruto Audio Fanfics and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto trained Moegi and Hanabi, Hinata, Ino&Tenten joined to turn his life upside down, part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Naruto grumbled as he stuffed things for the week-long survival instruction he was giving to Team Konohamaru's members as he called them. At some point Naruto almost called them Team Brats because the four of them really tried his patience, which in itself is awfully surprising considering how patient and caring Naruto usually is. Lately though, he seemed to be on the verge of blowing up all the time. It could be because of Sakura's constant bitchiness, it could be because of the general consensus that he was an idiot, or it could be that finally everyone had worn the patience of a saint to the very end of its limits. Either way, Naruto had a duty to perform. Bachan didn't really give him a whole lot of choice when she assigned this mission to him, and Naruto took it rather well. In other words, he threw a tantrum and screamed like a woman. But Tsunade in her infinite patience explained to him carefully his position and why this was important. In other words, she brained him and said the next one would be worse if he didn't do it, or something to that effect. Naruto groused, and tried very hard to wimp his way out of it, but Tsunade sweetened the deal by offering him B-rank pay, and would have someone teach him the body flicker jutsu, something he still hadn't learned but really wanted to. So, with a better attitude, he went and met the four. He already knew them on a basic level, name, family, ambitions, but didn't know a whole lot more. Konohamaru was grandson to the third Hokage, Hanabi was the youngest daughter of Hiashi Hyuga, and even more stuck up than him. Udon was an average kid with an average mom and a ninja father, and Moegi was an orphan with a lot of spunk, maybe too much. He tried training them all together, but that was a nightmare in living color. He had never seen a team with more individuals than when they first assembled Team 7, and he remembered how that turned out. He tried the bell test with them, and no one passed. Sadly, he saw that they all had a lot of talent individually, but none of them had the attitude to be teammates. Konohamaru wanted to lead, but his idea of letting was screaming orders and arguing with the ones who didn't listen. Udon was the follower, but he was exactly like Shikamaru, intelligent, but bone lazy. Hanabi was so haughty and unbearable that no one got along with her. And finally Moegi, she had great chakra control, and good capacity, but it seemed she really didn't know what she wanted. Originally she had a little hero worship thing going for Sakura, but at some point she seemed to drop that for no obvious reason. Naruto grumped again as he threw another sealing scroll in his backpack before he stood up and frowned. Naruto had already taken out Udon, and was impressed with the boy's knowledge, and he was able to instill in him a little more drive to get things accomplished. That in itself was an accomplishment that Naruto was proud of. Konohamaru was a little more difficult, but Naruto in his week of training was able to make Konohamaru understand that bullying or fighting with team members would only get them to not cooperate, and a good leader discussed all options with their team and listened to input and concerns. Naruto was glad he was able to instill that in him and thought he would be a better leader now as well as a better teammate. Today was his week with Moegi. Naruto was sure that Moegi would be similar to him. An orphan, forced to grow up in a difficult situation with no one or not enough people to care. The real story he didn't know about was not far off the mark but had a few distinct differences. This week would be a huge surprise for him. Oh. Naruto stood at the gate and waited for a few more minutes and began to grumble louder. It was already 10 minutes after 7, and he was sure he told her 7 am. If she didn't get here by quarter after, Naruto was going to go to her apartment and, well, beat on her door and find out what the hell she was doing. Naruto tapped his foot impatiently until a quiet voice behind him made him jump. "I'm ready when you are, boss." Naruto looked behind himself and frowned at her. "You're late," he said, but tried not to be nasty about it. Moegi smiled but shook her head. "No boss, I was standing outside the wall waiting for you. Ask the Chunin on duty." Naruto looked at the guard who looked really bored and might fall over fast asleep at any moment, then decided not to bother. "Fine. We have training to do, so let's get going." Moegi nodded, then fell in step with him. He glanced sidelong at her as he tried to get a handle on her personality. Moegi was not much to talk about. For the most part she was very average. She was 5 feet 2 inches tall, a little on the short side, small, thin-built, but with good muscle development for her age, considering most teens try to have model figures and keep up with the latest trends. And while she had pretty eyes, her face was rather plain, or maybe it was the lack of makeup. He had to admit though the oddest thing about her was her insane hairstyle. Moegi had two bizarre ponytails that she somehow got to stand straight up. Maybe it was her height problem and she was trying to compensate for it, but her hair was also colored an orange tint that screamed, "Here I am, kill me," as much as Naruto's old orange jumpsuit, and even he got rid of that after a while and settled down to his dark brown pants and jacket with orange trim and a black t-shirt. Naruto wondered why he thought about it, but Moegi did have a round backside and large firm hips which he caught himself looking at during odd moments. It was actually very shapely, a testament to her workouts and how strong her legs and hips were. He watched her workout with everyone else a few times and he noticed she favored running stairs, lunge thrusts, and other exercises that focus on the lower body. While he got her to focus more on the rest of her body as well, she still paid more attention to her lower body than anything else. Naruto faced forward again and tried to think of the exercises he and Moegi would be doing this week, and was unaware that Moegi was having thoughts of her own. Oh. Moegi tried not to grin as she noticed Naruto glancing at her out of her peripheral vision. Finally, all that hard work is paying off, she thought as she got a little more bounce in her step. She knew Naruto liked women with round bottoms, and she had been working day and night to get it to where he would notice, and finally he did. Moegi smiled inwardly as she marked a checkmark on her mental blackboard so she considered what she could do next. Moegi was lonely, and longed for something that most people would look strangely at her for. But while most would consider going to the people in their own age group and making friends and relations, Moegi had a fetish from when she was younger and was craving for attention of a different sort. Attention she used to get at the orphanage and now missed. She tried to fight it for a while, but in the end realized she couldn't deny what had become a basic need in her life. When she was younger, she was spanked often at the orphanage. Not because she was a bad or unruly child, but because she was overactive. When other children would lie down for nap time, Moegi would sneak off to do something, and after a while of this they started spanking her more often. To make matters worse, Moegi was like a lot of other orphans, starving for attention. Sometimes, when a child craves attention enough, even negative attention is preferable to none at all. When a new worker came in, and he noticed how Moegi would behave, that was when her spankings had truly started. At the tender age of 4 until she reached the age when she could start the ninja academy and was moved from the orphanage into student housing, all she knew was her daily spankings. She would misbehave. The man would take her to another room, spank her, then hold her and rub her back while she cried. Afterwards, everything would go about its normal routine. Now understandably someone would think he was taking advantage of her and leading up to something. But the man in question came from a large heavily disciplined family himself, so you misbehave, this is what you got. The thought of had never crossed the man's mind, but he was determined to keep Moegi on the good path, and that was through spanking. This happened twice a day, 3 times a week for 4 years and became a normal routine for Moegi, and in fact she actually missed it and felt alone after she started training. In an odd way, this is what Moegi considered love or a part of it. None of the other attendants did this. In fact, if anyone else spanked her, she was stood in the corner and left to cry in lonely misery, so for her, he really cared about her. In her psyche, love equated to discipline, something she had not had in a long time. In the long run, once she graduated from the ninja academy, she tried to be different. Listening to the other girls, she tried to adapt to the way they were. Unfortunately, she just couldn't do it. She thought she could like Konohamaru, but later realized he didn't do anything for her. His confidence was infectious, but then she realized his confidence wasn't his until later, he had modeled himself off of their mentor. At that point she began seeing Naruto as he really was, a man. Someone who could discipline her, but also give the loving care that she missed. Someone that would give her the attention she needed. She couldn't have a boy, or someone her age, she needed a mature man. Someone who would be firm, someone who would be compassionate, and give her what she had longed for in the last few years. Moegi had become very disappointed and unknowingly very frustrated and did not realize it, so it showed more and more in her attitude. What Naruto took for indecisiveness was actually her cry for him to be to her what she missed from her childhood, and what she now needed and wanted. Moegi was a very intelligent girl, and she saw how the girls that were attracted to Naruto would give him huge hints, and he in his naivete would take no notice, or would assume it was something else, until that girl lost interest in him, or in Hinata's case, died. Hinata though, in Moegi's opinion, was too weak to get what she wanted. In the end she sacrificed herself for the man she loved, but then left him broken and alone. If Hinata had stepped up with some kind of plan and made her wants known before that fateful day, maybe things would have been different. Moegi decided that she would learn from Hinata's mistakes, and while at this time she just couldn't come out and say what she wanted, she knew how to get it, or at least to push things in that direction. With the plans she had made the week before, she wouldn't be lonely ever again after this week. She was sure of it, she would make it happen. Oh. They stopped in the designated clearing and Naruto nodded before looking at Moegi. This is where we will set up our base camp, Moegi. Why don't you go ahead and get your tent set up, and I'll set up the fire pit and gather wood. Moegi looked at him and made a face that Naruto couldn't decipher. What's wrong? Moegi just shrugged her shoulders before she turned her back to him and bent over at the waist. Her shorts stretched tight across her backside, and Naruto could see blue panties peek out of the bottom of the legs. Naruto hadn't thought of a woman like this in a while, but seeing her panties as she bent over like that, and how round and full her butt looked made him blush and turn away quickly as he felt himself get excited. Moegi was his student, he couldn't think like that, in fact why was he thinking like that? Dropping his pack, Naruto summoned 6 shadow clones and they went off to do various things in the woods. Pulling a folding shovel from his pack, Naruto dug a small fire pit, and lined the outside with medium-sized rocks that one of his clones brought back. Soon another clone returned carrying firewood, and began stacking it near the pit as Naruto set it up to light. Before he did it though, he turned as he heard a content sigh. Moegi had lain down with her head on her pack and was watching the sky. Naruto's left eye began to twitch, but he forced himself to calm before he addressed her. Moegi, what are you doing? Moegi took a deep breath and sighed again before she answered. Just noticing how pretty the sky is right now. Naruto frowned before he stood. Aren't you supposed to be setting up your tent? Moegi nodded, then slowly got up and started working on her tent again. Yes, boss. Naruto watched to make sure she was going to continue until she bent over again, and her shorts seemed to uncover even more of her backside and panties and Naruto just stared until he felt like his nose was running. Reaching up he touched his nose and looked at his finger and realized he got a nosebleed. Turning away quickly, Naruto began to set up his tent as well. Unknown to him, Moegi giggled quietly. Oh, that first night of the survival trip, Naruto was beginning to feel extremely frustrated. He couldn't understand it. It was like Moegi had become a complete bubblehead overnight. She had difficulty doing the simplest things, things she was more than competent at before. Now she was almost completely inept at everything. Naruto found himself grumbling the whole night as Moegi screwed up or ignored everything she didn't want to do. During the tree climbing exercise, it seemed like her foot got stuck, so Naruto walked over to try and help her, and she fell on him, ass first. Luckily his face broke her fall. Now Naruto understood what the old phrase, "sit on my face," meant. Then she burned the meal to a crisp. Fortunately for her it was only his food that got burned, so she was still able to eat. Naruto settled for a ration bar, preferring to save his emergency food for later. Cups of instant ramen, we'll get to that later. Then as they were about to go to sleep, she, accidentally, kicked his tent pole, breaking it and forcing him to sit up longer than he wanted to make another and reset his tent up. Then to cap off the night, she woke him up screaming like someone was murdering her. Naruto charged out and dove into her tent. What's wrong? Moegi, what happened? Moegi had her blanket pulled up to her chin and was shaking with big eyes as she pointed outside the tent. A really big spider crawled out. Did you see it? Naruto blinked, then blinked again. It took a couple of seconds before he frowned at her. A spider. Moegi nodded her head, still trembling. A really big one. Naruto's left eye started to twitch on its own as he backed out of the tent and looked around. I don't see a spider out here, Moegi. Moegi poked her head out of the tent and looked around before she came out next to him, still on her hands and knees. Are you sure, boss? It was pretty big. Naruto almost growled as he looked down at her and saw all she had on were a pair of pink bikini panties now, and these barely covered her as he could clearly see the top of her firm, creamy, pale globes, and the crack between them. Naruto gulped as a part of him woke up and made its own tent. Naruto covered himself as best he could as he walked back to his tent, face aflame. Go to sleep, Moegi. Moegi frowned. But boss, what if it comes back? Naruto growled from his tent and she could barely make out his words. Invite it in for tea. Good night, Moegi. Moegi held in her giggle as she crawled back in her tent and grabbed a scroll that held a few distraction jutsus on it. Good night, boss, she said as she thought. Assuming you can sleep. Oh. Day 2. Morning. Naruto slowly climbed out of his tent and yawned with a growl. He wasn't sure why, but something kept waking him up during the night, like something was poking him in the head, and then he felt like something was tickling his feet. He would wake up, roll over and go back to sleep, but because of it, he didn't get much rest. To top it off, it felt like someone had been pinching his really hard, and it still felt a little tender. With a sigh, Naruto sniffed a couple of times and saw a pot cooking on the fire. Coming all the way out of the tent, he went over to investigate, just before Moegi came out of her tent. Oh hey boss. I felt bad about burning your food last night, so I made you something for breakfast. Naruto smiled at her, a genuine smile, as he clapped his hands in anticipation. Now this is the Moegi he remembered. Well, thank you, Moegi. I'm starved too. Moegi smiled as she turned and walked to where one of his clones discovered a river yesterday. I'm going to get some water, boss. I already ate, so eat as much as you want. Naruto nodded and waved her on as he pulled out a bowl and scooped a healthy portion of the stew into it. Pulling it close to his face, he took a deep sniff and made a sound of appreciation as he started shoveling the contents into his mouth. He had to admit in admiration, it was delicious, and in a short time, he had eaten it all and smiled in satisfaction as he rinsed out the pot and bowl just as Moegi returned to the camp. Thank you, Moegi, that was very good. Moegi smiled and nodded. Anything for you, boss, she said in a giddy manner. Naruto hadn't thought about how serious she sounded when she said that. He would learn. Naruto sighed happily before he pointed to the tree. Okay, Moegi, I want to see if you can make it to the top by lunchtime. If you do, I will start you on the next exercise. If you don't, then we will break for lunch, and you will continue afterwards. Do your best, and we will check your progress in a little while. Moegi nodded as she returned to her tree. Okay, boss. Naruto sat and took out his writing utensils and a scroll with a new jutsu he was working on. He had made some good progress on it, but it still needed some fine-tuning before he could actually say it comes close to doing what he wanted it to. After about an hour, his stomach started to feel strange. He wasn't really sure, but it was like it was bubbling. Naruto stood up and held his stomach with one hand as a surprised look came to his face. His stomach suddenly gurgled loudly and he felt a pressure in the lower part of his abdomen, right before a fart ripped from him without him wanting it to. Naruto grabbed his butt and clenched tight just as Moegi came over. Boss, have you seen my Binta root? Naruto looked at her as he began to sweat, hands squeezing his butt tighter. What is Binta root? Moegi frowns as she starts searching through her pockets again and touches her shirt pocket, which is open, and Naruto got a bad feeling. Oh, well, I chew on it when I'm feeling irregular. Naruto frowned at the word as he thought about it. Wait, irregular? He asked as a bit of gas escaped from him again, making a high-pitched squeaking sound no matter how hard he clenched. Moegi nodded again as she frowned and her face blushed a bit. Yeah, when I have trouble going, poop. She looked thoughtful as she looked at the cooking fire. I thought it was in my shirt pocket. I hope it didn't fall in the. At which point Naruto turned and sprinted into the woods as the pressure was too great to contain and something was going to come out whether he wanted it or not. Cue noises of extreme diarrhea and flatulence. Moegi didn't know how far he ran, but it sounded a lot closer than she wanted, or a week's worth of Binta root was just a little too much for Naruto's system. Moegi grinned as she shrugged. It won't be long now, she thought as she picked up his scroll and replaced it with one she had prepared earlier the week before. Pressing her fingertips to her lips, she touched the scroll with them, and went back to her tree climbing. An hour later, Naruto staggered back to the camp, looking like he lost at least 20 pounds. Naruto had never gone through anything that bizarre in his life, and hoped to never go through it again. He would definitely need a bath tonight. He tried not to be angry, but it looked like it was going to be a week he wished he hadn't gotten out of bed. With a sigh, Naruto picked up his scroll and brush and looked down at the parchment, and let loose one of the most high-pitched screams that ever came out of his mouth. 3 seconds later Naruto looked at the tree and bellowed like a tailed beast in rage. Moegi. Moegi jumped from the tree and ran to Naruto, a look of anticipation on her face. Yes, boss. Naruto pointed to the scroll on the ground, which instead of displaying hand seals and diagrams of the jutsu, it now had diagrams and hand seals, obscured by clouds, trees, and drawings of animals. What did you do to my scroll? Moegi blinked at it and shrugged. Well, it looked rather stuffy, so I tried to make it prettier so you would be happy. Naruto blinked as his face got redder until he snapped. Are you kidding me? It took me 3 weeks to get that jutsu to that point, and now you've ruined it. Moegi took a step back from him, but her insides quivered in anticipation. This is it, she thought in joy. Boss is gonna spank me. Just as Naruto pointed at Moegi, his face on the verge of exploding, he farted, and his stomach gurgled even louder than earlier. Naruto's hands grabbed his butt as he whispered, "Oh no," in a terrified voice before he sprinted back into the woods. Moegi frowned as she watched him run back into the bushes at Mach 3. Definitely too much Binta root, she said as she shook her head sadly and went back to tree climbing. Oh. Later that night Naruto lay in his tent and wondered who in the heavens or hells he had offended to drop this into his lap. 4 more trips to the woods that day and his stomach had finally calmed enough that he wasn't afraid to relax his lower muscles a little. And yes, he did have a trip to the river to bathe, because he desperately needed it, but then his clothes and towel had disappeared, forcing him to walk back while holding a large rock in front of himself. Luckily Moegi was conspicuously absent. Naruto was beginning to suspect something, but it didn't seem like Moegi was pranking him. If she was, she should have at least told him so he could join in the fun too. Maybe they were followed by Konohamaru. No, that didn't make sense either. He would have come out by now and made it known that he pranked his rival boss. Naruto's head hurt. He rolled over and tried to go to sleep. He would eat in the morning. Right now he just wanted to forget the last 2 days. The Binta root obviously took something, more than the excrement, out of him as he felt weak and tired. Moegi however tried to think of the one thing that would set him over the edge so she could get what she wanted. She would try one more thing, and if that didn't work she would do the most ultimate mean thing that she knew would definitely work, even though she didn't want to hurt Naruto's feelings, but it may be the only way. Naruto slept finally, thoughts of his scroll and the whole shitty, no pun intended, day in the back of his mind, until a loud boom made him jump, and he heard the pitter-patter of rain as it began to hit his tent. After a few seconds he shrugged and lay his head back down, until the scream of a small kunoichi caught his attention. With barely the energy to open his eyes he moaned out, "Go to sleep Moegi, the rain will wash the spider away." Moegi had other ideas though as she climbed into his tent and crawled under the covers with him. "Boss, I don't like the thunder, can I sleep here with you?" Naruto opened his bloodshot eye and looked at her, but at this point he didn't care. "Whatever," he said as his eye closed again. Moegi grinned as she moved away from him a little and struggled from side to side, before she pressed herself against him. Naruto lay there and began to have an interesting dream where a little wood nymph had climbed under the blankets with him, and had her bare pressed against his chest. She had large, and she wiggled so nicely against him. Something kept nagging at him, but he was so weary he pushed it away, and lost himself in the dream. After a few minutes, Naruto began to snore loudly, and despite Moegi's best attempts, she couldn't wake him again. With a frustrated sigh, Moegi decided she would have to do it, and hoped he would forgive her after. Still, this is better than nothing, she thought as she settled back against him and wrapped his arm around her and fell asleep. Day 3. Naruto awoke the next morning with a yawn before he opened his eyes and sighed. After 2 days of torture, he felt good because of a relaxing night of sleep, and despite everything that had happened up to now, he was going to make today a better day. Getting up, Naruto stepped out of his tent and saw Moegi going into her tent. With a shrug, he went over and saw fish cooking on the fire, and figured this would be safe. A few minutes later, Moegi came and sat with him in front of the fire. Sorry about last night, boss, I just don't like thunder. Naruto blinked as memory returned to him, then shrugged. It's alright, Moegi, but we have to learn to control and master our fear. It's alright to be afraid, but you can't let your fear control you. Moegi nodded as she smiled at him. Thank you, boss. If it rains again. Naruto sighed and nodded. Yes. Since no one else is with us, it's alright, but you will have to outgrow this eventually. Moegi nodded, and wondered how long before he noticed. Naruto took one of the fish and began to eat it. Between mouthfuls, he explained what they would do. Today we're going to move on to the water walking. You'll continue working on tree climbing in your spare time until you master it, but I think you have it good enough so you can learn the water walking. Moegi smiled and clapped her hands. Thanks, boss. Naruto blinked but then shook his head. He thought for a second her voice sounded sultry, sensuous, behind the little girl exuberance. Naruto frowned and chalked it up to him still being tired, and they started the day. Oh, noontime rolled around, and Moegi was doing very well on the water walking, so Naruto called a halt so they could eat lunch and rest. They walked back to the camp, and Naruto had a big smile on his face as if he was anticipating something. Moegi also had a big smile on her face as they got back, and Naruto went immediately to his ceiling scrolls and took out a particular one. Moegi quickly crawled into her tent and waited for the fireworks. Exactly 5 seconds later, the 4th of July occurred. Moegi came out of her tent trying not to smile as she saw the look of rage on his face. Yes, boss. Naruto held up a handful of empty instant ramen cups. Did you eat all of my ramen? Moegi looked crestfallen and her eyes dropped to her feet. I'm sorry, boss. I was hungry a few times, and I guess I overdid it. Naruto shook in rage, crushing the empty cups as he stared incredulously at her. You ate 100 cups of ramen in 2 nights because you wanted a snack. Granted, Naruto devoured that many in a day sometimes, but we are talking about a girl half his size. Normally, he would have been impressed. Moegi frowned as she looked at him shyly, beginning to pout. Well, you always told us that we could have some if we really wanted it. This was the last straw that broke Naruto's back. I said some, not all. Moegi nodded and bit her bottom lip, which looked rather attractive, but Naruto didn't notice this. I guess you should punish me, boss. I've done a lot of bad things. Naruto, not thinking clearly, nodded as he agreed. Yes, punish. You have been bad. He looked around and tried to figure out how best to make her learn her lesson, mumbling to himself the whole while. Push-ups till her arms fall off. No too lenient. Drop her from the treetop a few dozen times. No too extreme. Moegi got on her knees and crawled to him. Please, boss. I need to be punished. Kick me. Punch me. But please, whatever you do, I beg you, don't bare bottom spank me. Naruto blinked as he thought about that, then frowned. Huh. The young Kunoichi nodded as she saw his confusion. I can't stand the thought of a bare bottom spanking. Please tie me to a tree and set it on fire. Stake me out over an anthill and cover me with honey. Use me as a target dummy, but don't bare bottom spank me. Moegi's eyes were wide with mock fear and she clasped her hands in front of her as if praying for salvation. Naruto was still major angry, but confusion started to set in. Why? You should be punished, but a bare bottom spanking. That really scares you. Now Moegi knew Naruto was simple, but he was not stupid. So Moegi knew that if he thought about it too much he would backpedal and she would not get the attention she wanted, so she threw more kerosene on the fire. Yes, it terrifies me, anything but that. I should be punished. I ruined your new jutsu. And Naruto's face darkened. And I gave you really bad diarrhea. And Naruto's face darkened more and he began to breathe harder. And I ate all of your ramen. And Naruto's eyes turned red as they narrowed and his hands began to open and close at his sides. Your oh so delicious ramen, especially the spicy shrimp flavor that you love so much. She said as she stopped on her knees less than a foot in front of him. Naruto was so angry steam started coming from his ears. Moegi, he said in a deep raspy voice which sounded strangely calm. You've been such a bad girl. Moegi nodded in agreement as she inched closer to him. Yes, boss, a very bad girl. Please punish me so I will be good again. Naruto nodded as he reached down and grabbed her, picking her up in his strong arms and carrying her over to a log. Yes, and I know just how to punish you now. Moegi looked curious at him as he grinned evilly at her. How, boss? She asked with a hint of eager anticipation Naruto mistook for anxiety. Naruto gave a wicked laugh before he answered. Why? A bare bottom spanking. Moegi put on a good show of kicking and struggling with cries of, no. Not my bare bottom. Naruto sat down with an evil grin. Oh yes, I won't spare the rod and spoil the child this time. He yelled before he thought for a minute of how he would do this. She could easily run from him if he wasn't careful, and after all she had put him through, she wasn't going to get off easily. Moegi gave very realistic cries of, oh how cruel you are. I beg you don't boss, anything but my bare bottom. As at the same time she broke free of his grip, but instead of running as he thought she would, Moegi pulled her own shorts off, pushed her panties down to her knees and practically threw herself across his lap. Naruto blinked as she did this and wondered what the hell was going on as his anger started to give way to even greater confusion. But Moegi looked over her shoulder at him and reacted with true kunoichi reflexes. Oh, she thought. I better bring out the big guns. You know I really didn't like the miso ramen that much so I just threw them all away. Naruto's eyes bugged out and he screamed in rage. Sacrilege. And his hand came down with a loud crack, making her flesh jump. Moegi gasped as the shock ran through her, and then his hand struck again. The sting brought tears to her eyes as he began to rain spanks down on her, her backside jiggling and turning redder as he went. Moegi wasn't sure how long it lasted, but it wasn't long before she was sobbing and squirming on his lap. I'm sorry boss. I'm so sorry. Moegi will be a good girl. She cried as he spanked her until her bottom was completely red, but as his anger dissipated Naruto began to see Moegi again. Not the anger, not the things that upset him, but the girl he was now punishing. He suddenly stopped, and released the arm he was holding, as he didn't even realize he was holding it, and she hung limply across his lap. Moegi's sobs touched a spot in his heart and made him feel like a real bastard, and he pulled her up and hugged her to his chest, and rocked her, making shushing sounds and rubbing her back. Moegi, still sobbing, wrapped her arms around his neck and cried into his chest, feeling like she did so long ago, and was happy for it was his, her boss's strong arms that cradled her. Deep in her chest she could feel it again and despite her tears, she smiled in happiness. It took a while but her sobs settled until she was just hiccuping occasionally, and even though Naruto felt horrible, he looked down at her as she touched his cheek with one hand. Naruto blinked in surprise as he didn't see hate or anger or even fear in her eyes, but adoration, and something else he hadn't ever seen before. He was confused, and didn't know what to say, and it got worse for him as she leaned up, and her lips touched his. Naruto blinked in even greater surprise, but Moegi's hand behind his neck held him close with surprising strength until he was finally able to lean back from her. Moegi, what? He stammered at the tiny young woman on his lap. She smiled up at him before she rubbed her head against his chest again. Thank you boss, thank you so much. Naruto shook his head as he pulled her back from him and looked at her and tried to decipher what happened. Moegi, I just punished you, why are you thanking me? Moegi smiled again and Naruto noticed what he had never seen before. Moegi was actually very attractive. He couldn't understand it, but she looked very fetching and cute with tears in her eyes. Much like Hinata in the past, he had never noticed the beauty about his student until now, but then he had never seen her cry like this before either. Boss, I'm sorry, but I tricked you. I've wanted you to do this to me for a long time. At Naruto's confused, shocked look, Moegi began to explain to him about her time in the orphanage, and how she became accustomed to her daily spankings, and finally how she wanted him to be the one to take over that need for her from now on. Naruto shook his head before he frowned at her. But why me? Moegi was still smiling as she leaned up and kissed his neck, making him shudder. Because I know you will be good to me. I know you will be firm with me and yet be kind to me, but also punish me when I need it or want it, but mostly because and here she swallowed nervously as she blushed, but forced herself to continue. I love you boss. Naruto blinked as he processed all of that. His mind was on the verge of overload. Only one other person had ever told him that, and when she did, it was too late for him to do anything about it. Naruto frowned as he considered everything, and even though Moegi was 3 years his junior, he could already see a dedication in her eyes that he never received before. Hinata told him she loved him, but he never knew how much. Here with Moegi, he could see it. This was a whole different beast to tame, and Naruto wasn't sure how he would even begin to do it. I appreciate the feeling you've given me, Moegi, but there are problems with us having a relationship like this. We are both ninja, and I'm your sensei. Moegi grinned at him. Then I'll give up being a ninja. Naruto gasped and pulled back from her. What? No, I wouldn't ask you to do that. Moegi sniffed then shrugged. You don't have to ask me. If that is what it takes for us to be together, then that's what I'll do. Naruto didn't know what to say. She would give up her dreams of being a ninja to be with him. No one ever showed him this much dedication. Again, while Hinata had told him she loved him, her own timid nature prevented them from ever having anything significant between them. Now, while Moegi was younger than him, he realized no one had ever offered to sacrifice so much for him. Slowly he began to see things differently. Still being human, Naruto had doubts and worries. Before he could speak, however, Moegi rubbed her forehead against his chest, and he could hear her whisper. I need you, boss. I need to feel your cruel hand warming my backside, and your strong supportive arms holding me when I cry, and your kind heart beating next to my head. I'll do whatever you want, boss. Anything at all. But please, boss, please don't leave me alone. I don't want to be alone anymore. Naruto, with his big kind heart, heard the break in her voice before he saw more tears fall from her eyes. He could never hurt his friends, despite what they did to him, and now he wouldn't hurt Moegi either. As strange as this was to him, he couldn't deny the erection he had, and the fact that part of this had done things to him he never expected. Naruto realized that things would be difficult, hardly anyone would be accepting of a relationship between him and her, but the thought of not being alone anymore made him smile down at her as he made his decision. Tell you what, why don't we see what happens before we make a decision like that? I'm willing to see where we go first. Moegi nodded after she looked up into his eyes with a much happier smile now as she squeezed him tight. Now she wouldn't have to be alone either. After a while of them just sitting there and hugging, Moegi leaned back and looked at him again, and he could see the question on her face. Boss, I have a question, though it might seem a little weird. Naruto nodded as he looked down into her face. All right, Moegi-chan, let's see if I can answer it. Moegi smiled shyly at the honorific, but then bit her bottom lip for a second before she blushed lightly and stood up, her panties still around her knees. When I was younger and I was spanked, it would just hurt, but I would feel better after he would hold and rock me, but when you spanked me it did hurt, but it felt different, actually kinda good. Moegi's voice trailed off as her blush got deeper and her eyes looked down and Naruto's eyes followed hers until he was staring at her exposed crotch. Naruto could see without a shadow of a doubt the moisture glistening on her inner thighs. Down there, the instructors at the academy said it was a natural reaction when a girl is ready to have. Does that mean we should have too? Naruto was still staring at Moegi's crotch as a trickle of blood ran from his left nostril. Oh boy, was all he said before he fell back off the log and blissful darkness finally claimed him. The birds were chirping, the woods smelled of pine and other pleasant scents, and Naruto felt the little wood nymph from the night before snuggled up against him again. All was right with the world. Well, no, that wasn't quite right. For starters, there was no such things as wood nymphs, he thought anyway. Not like he had ever seen one or dealt with one in his past. Still, her little body against his felt good, and despite his mind telling him to wake up, he really didn't want to, in case this was a dream, and no one wants to interrupt a happy dream, do they? He felt soft lips touch his chin, which just made it all feel that much more enjoyable, but as he knew everything good and bad had to eventually end. Naruto blinked a few times then grunted as he noticed the sun was low in the sky. It was around noon before his impromptu nap. Looking down, he noticed bright orange hair on his chest and the head it was attached to. Thankfully, the diminutive kunoichi had pulled her panties back up, preventing Naruto from lapsing into blissful sleep again, but seeing her in said underwear still gave him an erection. Moegi, seeing this, giggled before her hand tentatively reached down and she ran a finger over and around the bulge, making him grunt. I see someone is awake again. Two someones actually. Which one should I play with first? Big boss or little boss? Naruto heard the slight tremor in her voice and saw the blush under her eyes and knew she was playing this up for him. Moegi was a lot of things, promiscuous wasn't one of them. Still, Naruto didn't know what to say as this was a bit beyond his experience level and he while traveled and trained by perverts, was not one himself, not completely anyway. Moegi's head turned on his chest to look at Naruto who smiled at her despite the blush on his face. Welcome back boss, you hungry for food or? Naruto opened his mouth to deny the obvious, but his stomach growled like a bear in heat which made both of them laugh. Moegi slowly levered herself up then kissed his lips, making a light smacking sound. I'll make you dinner since you slept through lunch. Naruto only nodded as Moegi picked up her shorts, then pulled them up her legs and slowly wiggled her hips into them, all but making Naruto's eyes cross. With a giggle she trotted back to her tent, a little gingerly from appearances, leaving Naruto to sit up and gaze after her in wonder. What happened? Oh yeah, Moegi wanted him to spank her. What else? Oh yeah, Moegi wanted to be his girlfriend and was willing to do anything to have that. Why would he in his right mind do this? Right, she said she loves me. He thought as he got up and stretched as he wondered what happened next. Right, I remember, like a little girl he passed out when she asked him about. At that point is when he started to panic. But I've never, and I couldn't. Well I could but I shouldn't, but she hasn't either, she wants us to. These and many other thoughts raged through his mind as he realized he was about to jump off into a very deep chasm that he knew nothing about and didn't know if he could handle. To make matters worse, he had heard stories of women who were unsatisfied with their lovers because they were too small in the wee man department. Since Naruto was fairly ignorant in this department, he wondered if his little boss, as Moegi put it, would measure up to her expectations. Since Naruto never talked to anyone about it, and paying attention in ed was a lesson in futility, he knew the mechanics, but that was it as he stared down at his crotch hopelessly. He was only 9 inches long, maybe she would be thoroughly disappointed with him. He wondered if they made a stretcher in case he was too small. Now before anyone thinks Naruto is a complete idiot, unlike most guys, Naruto was never obsessed enough about his to look at someone else's while in the public bathroom. Nor did he read or look at material of any sort. It was bad enough that Kakashi and Jiraiya did in front of him. So literally, Naruto was as educated in as a brick wall. But before more of these and other odd bits ran through Naruto's head, Moegi came back carrying a cup of instant ramen and handed it and chopsticks to him. Here you go boss, I'll actually make something, but I thought this might help until it's ready. Naruto looked at the cup and frowned. Spicy shrimp ramen. I thought you ate all of these. Moegi blushed before she bowed her head. Well I was a really bad girl boss. I knew I had to make you mad or you would have never given me what I wanted, so I pretended to eat all of your ramen. I like ramen, but not 100 cups in 2 days. Naruto nodded as he took a mouthful of his own personal salvation then sighed as he chewed then swallowed. So I guess you saved a couple. He said with obvious hope in his eyes and Moegi seeing the emotion there frowned sadly, regretting what she did as she pulled a familiar scroll from her back. A lot more than a few boss. All but 4 now. I did eat 2 of them. Naruto blinked in surprise before he carefully set his cup of soup down then tackled Moegi and hugged her tight and was kissing her face in random places. Thank you. Smooch. Thank you. Smooch. Thank you. Smooch. And on it went for a few minutes with Moegi giggling and holding on to the happy Jonin, happy Jonin. She had never had this kind of affection before and she started to realize why so many of the other girls talked happily about boys kissing them and bringing them flowers and such. If this is what it was like, she was all for it. Unfortunately, reality always creeps in. It took a few seconds, but Moegi's legs came up and gripped Naruto's hips tightly while her arms squeezed him lovingly and Naruto sighed at the feeling just before their eyes met. Moegi leaned up to kiss him again, when her eyes popped open in surprise. Naruto was pressed tightly against her, and now she could feel every centimeter. Holy shit, he's huge, she practically screamed in her mind. Running her fingers along it gave her a semblance of an idea of how big it was, but being able to actually feel almost the full length of it pressed against her gave her a much better idea, and it scared the crap out of her. Kami, he's almost as long as I am tall. A gross exaggeration of course, but he was a lot bigger than she thought he would be. While at the same time Naruto's eyes widened as he realized, shit, she can feel it. I bet it's too small, she doesn't want me now. Both suddenly disengaged and jumped back from each other looking sheepish and both blushing furiously. Neither felt entirely comfortable as their eyes avoided each other, until both blurted out the first thing that came to mind. "I'll go cook dinner." Moegi practically shouted. "I gotta piss." Naruto shouted as he ran in the opposite direction. It seemed that this relationship was already off to a rough start. Oh. Naruto was eating quietly, enjoying the taste of the rabbit that Moegi had caught and cooked when she interrupted him quietly. "Boss, I'm going to go take a bath. I need to wash my hair and you know." Her eyes couldn't meet his without her blushing up a storm, and he was sure that eventually tonight or the next day she was going to break the news to him that she didn't want him because he was so small. He felt glum now, as he had pushed the thoughts mostly away, but here it was in his face again. "Okay," he grunted. "Be careful." Moegi nodded as she stopped as if she wanted to say something to him, then turned and walked off towards the river. She wasn't sure what to do now. He was obviously huge, and she was still a virgin, and she saw the disappointment in his face before they pulled apart. "Maybe I'm being too much of a chicken," she thought as she arrived at the bank of the river. "I mean, it isn't like something larger won't eventually come out of there, so if a baby's head can come out, I'm sure he can go in without killing me." It didn't take Moegi long to come to this conclusion. She was a smart girl after all, but it is human nature to be afraid or unsure. He has to understand he is getting something special, something that no one else ever has had and no one else ever will. She didn't think that was the problem, but then she realized what it was. "He thinks I'm too inexperienced, maybe he still sees me as a little girl, well I'm a woman damn it." She groused at this as she realized he wasn't getting turned on enough. "Well, it might hurt me really bad, but I won't give up on this. The boss is mine, and if he wants a wild woman, then that's what he's gonna get." As Moegi waded into the water, she vowed that it didn't matter how big his dong was, it was hers and she would do anything to keep it hers. It would fit anywhere he wanted it to, even if she had to use a shoehorn, he was going to fit inside of her, and she would pursue him every chance she could to make sure it happened. With a curt nod, Moegi removed her clothes and considered how she could start. Naruto had no clue what he was in for. Oh. Naruto stood and stretched. Scared of being inadequate or not, Moegi was a good cook and he loved the thought of her being around, so here he hoped she wouldn't turn him out. He would have to ask Kakashi. Maybe there was a jutsu that would enable him to change the size, or maybe Choji. Yeah, they have that expansion jutsu. Maybe Choji would teach me a little something so I could make Mo-chan happy and she wouldn't leave me. Naruto for the 12th time cursed the Kyuubi as it was probably the damn fox's fault his was so small. Naruto wondered what he could do, at least to postpone what she was probably going to do. It saddened him to think that any woman would be so shallow, but then men ran after women with big or good looks. He guessed there were problems in both men and women, but he wished Mo-chan wouldn't care. A few minutes of troubled thoughts gave way to an inspirational idea on Naruto's part. Wait, if I put off with Moegi until I can figure out if I can make it bigger, then it will at least buy me some time to figure something out. Naruto had no idea the oddball time he was about to have because of his own ignorance, but years later it will be something that he remembered fondly, and still with a hint of embarrassment. Moegi walked quietly into the camp with a grin on her face as she snuck into her tent. She hoped he would like what she had done, even she had to admit it is time for a change, and this was a pretty good one. She quickly dug out her skimpiest string bikini panties, which incidentally were orange, and pulled them up her legs as she wiggled into them. Moegi couldn't help but snicker to herself. "Oh yeah, the boss is gonna get it, and so am I," she whispered with conviction as she then pulled on her t-shirt, and nothing else. With a hint of mischief, she grabbed a scroll from her backpack and skipped out of her tent. Naruto sat mulling over his worried thoughts until he heard her come up behind him. Of course he knew it was Moegi, he recognized her scent immediately, and her small yet strong arms wrapped around his neck and hugged him tight. "Hey Mo-chan, dinner was good as always." Moegi giggled cutely then kissed his neck. "Thanks boss, I'm glad you liked it." She was quiet for a moment before she squeezed him tight again and he could feel her being nervous. "What's wrong Moegi? Did I say something or do something to upset you?" Moegi shook her head no and he could feel something different as he sat there. It took a few seconds but he held her arm and turned around to look at her before she smiled shyly at him. Naruto's eyes opened wide and a silly grin came to his face as he took in her new look. Moegi had washed her hair thoroughly, rinsing out everything, including the obscene amount of gel she used to keep her hair up in that ridiculous hairstyle. Her new look was much more appealing and Naruto found himself breathing heavier. Moegi, what did you do to your hair? Moegi pouted as she pulled on one of the braids. Why? Don't you like it? Moegi had done her hair now in single braids all over her head in what Naruto thought was called corn roll, or something like that. Think Celtic and you will understand. With her hair like this she was very attractive, even beyond pretty he thought as he noticed her look on her face and shook his head quickly. No Mo-chan, I like it. I think you look awesome like that, in fact I like it a lot. Moegi grinned happily again before she reached behind her back and pulled out the scroll she had hid earlier. Here you go boss. Naruto looked at it with a frown before he unrolled it and gasped. Moegi, this is. Moegi nodded with a grin blushing lightly under her eyes at his happy face. Yes boss, it's your jutsu scroll. Naruto looked at her in astonishment as he realized he was right originally. Moegi had played a bunch of pranks on him, and he hadn't caught on until she revealed them to him. He was actually proud of her, and a side of him was incredibly turned on. Any girl that could out-prank him was the girl for him. Naruto carefully sat the scroll aside, then tackled Moegi again for the second time that day, making her squeal in surprise, but cling tightly to him as he started kissing her face again. Thank you. Smooch. Thank you. Smooch. Thank you. Smooch. On and on it went. Naruto was so happy, he didn't even notice her state of undress, until she started dry humping him. Despite his enormous size, Moegi was not going to run from him again. While she tried to decide what to do, a flash of inspiration came to her as she felt a thrill of pleasure from where he was pressed against her, and she moved her hips involuntarily. It felt even better when she helped it along, and she could definitely feel herself getting wet now that she recognized what it felt like, so she did it again, and then again until she was panting and sighing quietly while he was kissing her. If it feels this good outside, then maybe inside, she thought as she closed her eyes in pleasure. Moegi was on cloud 7 and swiftly approaching cloud 9, the pressure tightening in the center of her core, until Naruto realized if they kept this up, she would probably want. Oh no you don't. He shouted to no one in particular as he got to his feet, Moegi still clinging to him. Realizing this he pulled her arm free, but her other one gripped his jacket tightly. He pulled that one loose with some effort, but then her legs were still wrapped tightly around his waist. Moegi was so close, she felt the pressure building and she was about to release when Naruto finally got her off of him and dropped her on the ground, scrambling back from her. Moegi blinked in shock, and now unreleased energy before she whined to him. Why boss? What's wrong? Seeing the look on her face, Naruto thought quick then immediately grabbed his with both hands. Diarrhea. Yeah. Then turned and sprinted into the woods still holding his butt and making loud fart sounds with his mouth. Moegi frowned as she thought about it then sighed. I didn't think I gave him that much binta root. She pat her belly, lower belly, sadly but vowed they would do it next time. That vow would prove a little hard to keep. Oh. Moegi kept hovering near him as he stared intently at his recovered jutsu scroll. She knew he was happy about having the precious item back, but it seemed to her like he was purposely avoiding interacting with her. Twice she had wandered into her tent and looked through her belongings, wondering if she shouldn't go to that lingerie store, Darla's drawers when she got back. Maybe my cute panties aren't enough for him. Moegi pulled the string and let it snap against her hip before she sighed and went back out to look at Naruto wistfully. And she even picked them out because of his previous taste for the color orange. Well, Moegi was not the kind of kunoichi to give up easily, so she thought hard on what she could do. She wanted to train, because she wanted to get stronger, but now she also wanted him in more ways than one. As she considered, a small grin spread across her face and Naruto felt a chill run down his back. Why do I get the feeling I'm in deep shit? He wondered just before Moegi bounced up next to him. Hey boss. Naruto looked at her warily and she smiled, making him feel less nervous. Yes Mo-chan. Moegi, still smiling, bent over as she leaned near Naruto and he could see clearly down her top and was captivated by her soft glowing. They weren't big, maybe a small B cup, but from what he could see they were shaped very nicely. I was wondering if maybe we could do a night run. You know, you trained me in stealth tactics and hunter nin techniques since you were one for a time. Naruto frowned in thought as he considered, eyes still focused on her cleavage. Well yeah Moegi, that would actually be a good idea. I wanted to get you down with the basics first to improve your chakra capacity, but since you have become very good at stealth I could set you on that path if you want. Moegi nodded with a smile, bouncing happily and making Naruto's eyes bounce as well before he gave himself a headache watching her. Sounds good boss. When can we start? Naruto shook his head before he looked at her. Well why don't we rest tonight, and we will do it tomorrow night. I have a funny feeling we will need all of our energy. Naruto got a troubled look for a second before he shrugged it away. Moegi grinned before she hugged him. Thanks boss. You're the best. Naruto enjoyed the tight hug she gave him, and felt a little saddened when she let go, but he knew if he didn't let go he would begin having problems of his own and might be unable to control himself. With a cute giggle, Moegi turned and walked 3 steps before she bent down to pick something up. Naruto wasn't sure what it was, but he didn't care as Moegi's panties stretched tight across her backside and clearly highlighted her womanly assets, or as the perverted would put it, showed off her camel toe. Naruto could clearly see she was wet, and he was unable to figure out how the skimpy little panties were able to stay wrapped so tightly over her bottom without tearing and falling off. If Naruto could see her face, he would know she was blushing furiously, but her embarrassment gave her even more excitement before she stood straight and bounced back over and into her tent. Naruto quickly pushed an index finger up his nose and held it there until he got a tissue to stop the blood flow. If this kept up, he would have to start using it by the case. For a few seconds, he wondered if maybe it would be worth it to just show her his shame and see if she could accept him or not. This way at least he could get it out of his system and stop torturing himself, but after a few minutes he shrugged it off as hopeless and would stick to his original plan. Still, Moegi bounced and shook in a way that made him want to sit up and howl at the moon. No. Stop it you baka. He berated himself as he smacked his head hard with his right hand. If she saw you now she would be so disappointed she would drop you like a hot rock, just stay calm. Looking at his tented pants Naruto frowned. How do I stay calm? Thinking hard, no pun intended, Naruto came to the only realization available. Rolling up his scroll, Naruto grabbed a towel and clean pair of boxers and jogged to the stream. A nice cold bath is just what the doctor ordered to drive the perviness away. Naruto, strangely enough, hadn't realized he was talking to himself out loud. Moegi frowned as she saw his problem, and realized what she was going to do was working, but it was driving him in the opposite direction. If she had heard his earlier confession then the outcome surely would have been different, but since she only caught the tail end and his desire to calm himself, she was left a little saddened, but still just as determined. I'm still not enough, she thought as she looked down at herself. Moegi cupped her then lightly squeezed them in confusion, ignoring the trill of pleasure that ran through her. Okay, I know they aren't the biggest, but boss is a butt man. Moegi looked behind herself as best she could and frowned deeper. Reading a few women's articles she discovered most men were into the bubble butt look. Not the great big gargantuan butt like some people think, but the perfectly round derriere that stuck out noticeably no matter what angle you looked at it. Moegi had sweated and worked hard to perfect it, and when he looked at her 2 days ago with that lust she had never seen before in his eyes, she knew she was there, so all she needed was a little nudge in the right direction. Moegi med as she realized she would have to change her panties. They felt soaked and she wondered if she would always get this wet, if so then maybe everything wouldn't be so bad. Moegi's hand touched herself absently and she shuddered as a pleasurable thrill raced through her. After it had passed she looked down in wonder. That's never happened before. Our little kunoichi had never discovered that once you unlocked your, much like Pandora's box you wouldn't be able to lock it away again. Moegi's fingers tentatively strayed again, rubbing along her crease through her panties and let out an enwrapped moan as her body shook again, eyes going glassy. Moegi, despite her determination, was still a little afraid of the actual act because of all of the pain-filled stories she heard, but her teacher's words is what gave her the most hope. Sure, it's going to hurt, like a needle or when the doctor checks you in those delicate spots. But I promise after the initial pain, you'll wish you had done it sooner, and some of you will try and make up for lost time. I know I did when I was your age. A lot of the girls laughed it off, but touching herself now, and the way it felt when she was humping Naruto, she understood now what she meant. After a few more light rubs, Moegi got a wicked idea and smiled to herself. She suddenly knew what to do. I've been a very bad girl, she said before smacking herself on her backside. Oh. Naruto crept quietly back into camp and not seeing Moegi, he assumed she was asleep. He was safe for the rest of tonight at least. He tiptoed over and deposited his washed clothes on the tree branch next to Moegi's and grinned at the orange panties. She looked so damn in them that he wanted. Naruto blinked and forced the images from his mind as he grabbed his questing hand, fingers just centimeters from the temptation. Quickly he turned and strode towards his tent. Must banish impure thoughts. I gotta stay focused. Thoughts such as these may have carried him through, if someone else didn't have other plans of their own. As Naruto entered his tent, he crouched down to get his bedroll ready, and the sound of a zipper made him pause and turn around. Moegi, crouching behind him, had closed the zipper on his tent, sealing the two of them in, and Naruto began to sweat. What made things worse, all of his hard attempts to drive back the hidden pervert in him were undone by the simple act of her turning on the battery-operated light, and him seeing her completely. Naruto's mouth opened and closed as Moegi moved towards him on her knees, and he could see the patch of orange curls between her legs before she was on him, kissing in his neck furiously. The first thing in Naruto's mind was, run, hide, get away. But his desire and Moegi's will were winning out, until Moegi bit him hard. Naruto yelped in pain, but then she did it again in another spot. Naruto began laying hands on her to get her to stop, but then she started hitting him in his legs and arms, causing minor pains, more of an annoyance really, but it was starting to tick him off. Mo-chan, what are you? Ow. Cut it out. Wait, you're pinching now. Ow. That hurt, damn it. And on it went until he began to see red around the edges of his vision. Naruto growled deep in the back of his throat as her teeth latched onto his ear and bit so hard he was sure he was bleeding. Then make me stop, boss. Her voice was so low and sultry Naruto was caught between anger and horniness, until she bit his shoulder right where it met his neck. With a final yell of pain, Naruto finally grabbed Moegi by the shoulder and threw her down on his leg and held her in place. She struggled valiantly, but Naruto knew what she wanted and guessed he had to teach her to mind him. With a loud crack, his hand came down on her backside, making her screech and struggle harder, but his other hand landed firmly in the middle of her back and held her steady across his leg as his working hand began to minister its lesson to her posterior. 10 quick strikes and Moegi was crying, legs and arms kicking helplessly as Naruto gave her a painful reminder of who the boss is. After another good 5 swats and she finally stopped trying to get away, the boss decided she had had enough. Naruto pulled her into his arms and held her tight against him. She had the punishment. And now he would return the happiness. Moegi sobbed her eyes out, apologizing over and over again as Naruto rocked and shushed her. Forgive your girl, boss. I'm sorry, I know I was naughty. Please forgive Moegi, boss. It seemed everything would return to normal as after a few minutes she calmed, but Moegi suddenly shifted and pushed them both over and she maneuvered herself until she sat on his chest looking down at him. With a sly smile, and tears still apparent on her face, she spread her legs wide in front of him. Now, boss, please watch your girl. Watch your Moegi. Naruto opened his mouth to protest, but seeing the hopeful look in her eyes, he only nodded dumbly. Moegi grinned still as her left hand squeezed her and she rubbed at the with her thumb. A soft moan escaped her and Naruto almost gasped himself as he never expected this, nor had he ever seen it before. Moegi kept squeezing and kneading her just before she pinched and pulled at her with a moan that eclipsed her earlier one in pitch and volume. Naruto's mouth was wide open and his eyes were so big it was a miracle they hadn't popped out on their own, but Moegi got the desired effect she wanted when she glanced quickly over her shoulder and could see his had defiantly tented his boxers and now threatened to pop out the flap. With a groan of pleasure, Moegi's left hand snaked down and traced her now soaked nether lips, making her sigh in pleasure before her index finger teased her hard little nub that was peeking out of her folds. Naruto gasped as he saw it and his eyes couldn't leave the sight of her finger tracing over it and making it shudder in time with her labored breathing. Moegi continued to rub, getting more and more insistent until finally she was rubbing her crotch with both hands, and Naruto held her hips as she rocked, dragging her kuni over his rock-hard abs. Making desperate moaning sounds until finally, her back arched, and she released, her orgasm coming in one powerful stroke which was so powerful it felt almost painful. Coupled with the sheer excitement, embarrassment of what she just did in front of Naruto left her shuddering and lying half atop her boss who grinned down at her after his initial shock. Neither said anything for a time until Moegi pulled back and looked into his eyes and smiled. She saw the desire there and knew there was no turning back now. She had to have him and he had to have her, consequences be damned. With a deep breath Moegi pushed her hips back until Naruto's meat made contact with her backside, and he gasped in pleasure this time. Moegi with a perverted grin pushed herself back further and partially captured him between her cheeks and sighed as Naruto moaned deeply. The look of pleasure was also mixed with a look of trepidation as he hoped she wouldn't notice, but after a few seconds Naruto and Moegi blurted out at the same time, "It's so big, boss." And Naruto, "I'm sorry it's so small, Moegi." Moegi stopped moving and gaped at him as his face did the same and they continued to speak to each other. "So small," Moegi shouted, while Naruto returned, "So big." Then both burst into giggles and merely lay with each other laughing. After a few seconds, Naruto grinned at her. "You first." Moegi nodded as she watched his expression. "You're a lot bigger than I expected, boss. Hell, you're a lot bigger than most men, and I was scared at first because it is so big." Naruto frowned as he looked at her but saw no deception. I thought it was too small and you would be disappointed because it wasn't bigger." Moegi looked at him incredulously and shook her head from side to side quickly. "No, boss, that's not true. In fact, you're huge compared to a lot of guys from what I hear." Naruto frowned as he considered. He thought 9 inches was pretty big, but he never really knew otherwise. Moegi frowned at him as she considered. "Wait. Who told you that you were too small?" She worried that some other kunoichi or one of the meaner civilians may have damaged Naruto's confidence in this department, that the woman must be like a cave if she thought Naruto was too small. Well, no one. I just heard stories on how some girls like it to be bigger and they get disappointed when it isn't. When you looked at me earlier I just thought," and Naruto looked a little sheepish before he shrugged. Moegi giggled a little before she leaned down and kissed him. "No one could ever call my little boss, little Naruto-kun." Naruto snickered before he pecked her lips with his. "So now what?" Moegi frowned as she considered. She never thought Naruto was a virgin either and now that it presented itself, she was realizing just how naive her boss really was. With an inward sigh, Moegi pushed herself back until the head of his pole was poking between her lips and she sighed before she picked herself up and used her strong legs to her advantage, squatting over Naruto. "Watch me, boss. Watch your girl Moegi again." Naruto nodded enthusiastically as Moegi began to rub her, slowly at first, then began to move more vigorously over her vulva and hood. It didn't take long before her began to poke out and every stroke would make her moan loudly and push her hips down towards Naruto. Naruto was enjoying both the show and the sensations as he watched her, and he was left wondering if it was possible that this could feel any better. Truly, Naruto had no clue. Moegi proved to him it could as her orgasm ripped through her, and she opened her mouth, gasping and shaking over top of his manhood, until with her last conscious effort she forced her sopping wet cunt down onto his, and screamed in pain as he broke through her barrier and nestled inside of her. Naruto's hands immediately caught her, and he blinked in concern and confusion as Moegi began to sob anew. He tried to be noble and lift her off of him, but her hands clenched his arms hard as her legs clamped to his sides. Naruto desisted, and waited patiently for Moegi to stop crying, soothing her any way he could until she finally looked at him with a smile. "My instructor was right," was all she said, confusing the hell out of him until she started to move. Naruto groaned in pleasure as he felt every inch of his manhood slide out until Moegi slid him back in again with a beautiful sigh. She still grunted in pain every so often, but it became less and less until they were both moaning and sighing in pleasure. Before long, Moegi began to drive herself back on Naruto, making high-pitched gasping sounds as he went deeper and deeper into her. While the pain was greater than she originally assumed, the pleasure now was even greater as she crested then crashed over the peak of another orgasm. Moegi was no longer afraid, in fact she was swimming with the idea of this very act happening every night from now on as she began talking to Naruto. "Oh boss, you feel so good inside me, have your girl boss, have as much of me as you want. Moegi is your girl. I love you, boss. I love you. Naruto, as those words slammed into his ears and through his brain tensed up as the power of her conviction combined with their mutual pleasure overloaded him finally, and he fired like a missile into her, spewing what felt like every ounce of fluid in his body deep inside of Moegi. Moegi, for her part, slammed down onto him as he drove up and accepted all he had to offer and held on for dear life as they both became hazy from the combined orgasm. After a time, Naruto's senses came back and he felt Moegi shudder on top of him, and he felt tears as they splashed against his chest. Naruto reached down and rubbed along her back. Mo-chan, what's wrong? Did I hurt you? Moegi shook her head negatively as she kissed his chest. I didn't know it could feel like this. I didn't know I could love you so much. I love you, boss. I really love you. Moegi began to cry again, and Naruto, feeling misty-eyed himself, hugged her close and pat her back. He had to agree, he never knew love could feel like this. Naruto sighed in contentment as he pulled a blanket over both of them, and his eyes half closed, until Moegi started moving again. Naruto's eyes opened wide as he looked at the evil grin on her face. Moegi. His voice squeaked. The kunoichi just shrugged her shoulders as she pushed back until she could feel him even deeper inside of her than before. Sorry, boss, but I'm not taking even a second for granted. I want you as much as I can, as often as I can. Naruto, not one to look a gift horse in the mouth, much, blinked in surprise before he began to help her with his hands, cupping her generous bottom. But what if you get sore? Moegi gasped, then shrugged as she bit his Adam's apple, a slight blush on her cheeks as she concluded that being shy and holding back would only hurt their relationship. I still have 2 other holes you can fill, boss. They need your attention too. Naruto blinked in surprise, but quickly rolled Moegi over onto her back, making her shriek then giggle. In that case, here come the boss. The rest of the week went like a charm for Naruto and Moegi. He trained her in the tactics she wanted and proved to Naruto just how good at stealth she had gotten, impressing him even more. In fact, he discovered for the second time just how extensive Moegi's plan to be his was, as the recent bubblehead Moegi was immediately replaced by the confident kunoichi he remembered well, and now looked forward to spending more time with her. When quietly confronted, she blushed then giggled slightly at him. Well, boss, I'm still a girl, especially now, but I am also a woman. So I guess you will have to be ready for which one you get. I may want to wear pink and have you give me a piggyback ride, or I might ride you until the cows come home. I'm sure you won't mind either way. Naruto chuckled as he remembered something Kiba told him months back. Okay, I don't mind as long as you don't get bubblegum on me. Moegi blinked at that but didn't catch the reference. When Friday finally came, neither wanted to leave the woods, but both knew they had to go back, and Naruto had to report to the Hokage, and that he wasn't looking forward to. Walking along the trail, Moegi had taken his hand and held tightly to it, surprising Naruto, but he held on just the same. Moegi looked a little sad and Naruto was sure he knew why, and he stopped them just below the rise that would take them within sight of the village. Mo-chan, there's something I have to tell you. Moegi's face lost its color and she gripped his hand tighter as her eyes became moist. I already know, boss, but please, I'm begging you, please keep disciplining me. I know I'm not worthy of your attention. And Naruto blinked in shock at her. Moegi, what are you talking about? Moegi blinked back the tears that threatened to spill from her eyes and she dared to look at him hopefully. Why, you aren't breaking up with me? Naruto stumbled back and almost fell before he caught himself on a tree branch. What? Why would I do that? Moegi frowned as she reached up unconsciously and played with one of her braids. Well, that's what most guys do. They have with someone, then they dump them for someone prettier or with bigger or. And Naruto was suddenly kissing her, his tongue in her mouth and attacking hers as she gasped in shock before her eyes rolled closed and she happily returned the kiss. It lasted for a few moments, more than long enough to be classified as a classic kiss before they both pulled slightly back from each other. Moegi looked up into Naruto's blue eyes and saw what she had only heard of before but now understood. The famous determination of Naruto. When the boss's eyes sparkled like that, she knew immediately that no one was getting dumped. Mo-chan, don't ever think that way. You are so beyond a precious person to me that it would kill me to do something so bad to you. I would never do that to you or any other woman. Especially not to someone that loves me, and I am falling in love with. Believe it. Moegi's eyes threatened to unleash a torrent of tears as she looked at him and immediately stopped worrying. With a nod of her head, she hugged him tight. Thank you, boss. I love you. Naruto responded by hoisting Moegi to his back as she squealed, then set off at a light jog until they reached the gates. The Chunin on duty grinned at the two before waving them in without a word. Naruto smirked at him before he continued along. Through town they got mixed looks as Naruto still carried her on his back. Some looked on with disdain, others with smirks, but quite a few seemed indifferent. In the time Naruto had become more accepted or in most eyes, tolerated. He was a fixture in the Leaf Village and everyone knew it except for the die-hard haters who had nothing better to do with their time than live in the past. Naruto was beyond caring, however. He had something finally that made him want to dance and sing, and that was all that mattered. He had a feeling she would be quite a handful, but the human mind had a wonderful capacity to not give a shit, and that was Naruto's mindset until the Hokage tower came into view. Moegi immediately felt Naruto begin to sweat and she knew what he was nervous about. Leaning closer, she planted a kiss on the side of his neck with a sultry purr. Don't worry, boss. I'm your girlfriend, and I meant it when I said that I would quit being a ninja if it got you into trouble or would get you into trouble. You're all that matters to me now. Naruto still didn't want that to happen, but he nodded with a sigh. I know, Mo-chan, it's just that, well, Bachan hits so damn hard. His voice tailed off in a whine and Moegi giggled before she kissed his neck again. Then I'll make it all better later, K. Naruto smiled then nodded. K. He said, mimicking her. He had to admit, Moegi's good nature was infectious and for that he was glad. Finally putting her down, they walked the steps up into the tower and approached what Naruto considered the office of pain. Shizune sat at her desk and smiled happily at the blonde before she nodded to Moegi. Everything go okay? Naruto nodded and Moegi grinned and beamed at him. Boss is amazing. He kept me up all night a few times, learning, but I think it was all worth it in the end. Moegi punctuated the last part by smacking herself on her backside to Naruto's heavy blush and Shizune's laugh. Well, I always said he would be a good teacher. I'm glad he has such good students to learn from him. Moegi grinned at Naruto before she looked at Shizune again with a slight blush under her eyes. And boy did he teach me. In fact, yesterday MMPH. She said as Naruto slapped a hand over her mouth. As Bachan in. Shizune blinked in surprise then nodded. Yeah, just go right in. Naruto nodded gratefully before he pulled the slightly struggling Moegi into the Hokage's office and closing the door. Shizune wasn't positive, and she played the scene in her mind again, but she was sure something wasn't right about that conversation. After a few seconds Shizune blinked then frowned at the office door. Did Naruto and Moegi, but after a few seconds she shook her head. Nah. If Naruto never noticed Hinata in all those years, I doubt he will notice Moegi. With a sigh and grumble about clueless brothers, she went back to pecking away at the keyboard. Oh. Naruto released Moegi, who grinned at him mischievously. What are you trying to do, Moegi? Moegi was about to answer when Tsunade cleared her throat, gaining both of their attention. Something you want to share? Naruto looked sheepish and shook his head negatively while Moegi blushed a little then shrugged. No, Lady Tsunade. I was just playing a prank on the boss. Tsunade rubbed her temples before she pointed to the chairs in front of her desk. Sit down and shut up, both of you. It's been a shitty day already and I'm not in the mood. Naruto blinked at the Hokage then nodded as he waited for Moegi to sit, then he took the seat next to it. Before she spoke up again, Naruto popped an energy drink and took a chug before he gave her his undivided attention, which isn't saying much. How did it go, Moegi? Moegi looked thoughtful for a moment before she smiled. It was awesome, Lady Tsunade. The things he showed me, the things I learned, I never knew the boss was so versatile and his stamina is incredible. No matter what, he never slowed down or stopped, even when I was exhausted and could barely move, hurting in places I never hurt before. He encouraged me to go on, and I somehow found the strength to force my body for one more time. Tsunade glared at the now pale Jinchuriki and her voice deepened. I got stories from Udon and Konohamaru of how rough Naruto can be. I hope he hasn't scarred you for life. Moegi's eyes became dreamy for a second and a small smirk appeared on her face. Oh no, if I had the choice to do it all over again, I would, Lady Tsunade, twice. The Hokage looked at Moegi for a moment and frowned. So he wasn't too hard on you. Moegi's smirk turned into a full-blown grin before she answered, mischief clearly in her eyes. Oh, he was definitely hard. Naruto took that moment to spit half the energy drink across the room and cough up a storm. It can be said you have never had a rush until Monster Energy drink came out of your nose. Naruto would attest to this. Moegi was immediately next to him, patting him on the back, a look of worry on her face. Boss, are you okay? Naruto nodded after a few seconds and a couple wheezing breaths. Okay, I'm fine. Cough, wrong hole. Which he immediately regretted as Moegi, still leaning close to him, whispered. Any hole you want, boss. Which in turn put Naruto back to hacking and wheezing. It took a few more moments, but Naruto got his breathing under control and sat up in the chair again, only to see two very angry eyes staring a hole through his head. With the feeling of impending doom hanging over him, Naruto said the first thing that came to mind. Oh shit. Tsunade nodded slowly at him as she addressed Moegi. Indeed. Could you wait outside please, Moegi? I need to debrief my Jonin. Moegi frowned as soon as she realized what must have happened and tried to intervene. Lady Tsunade, but the Hokage wasn't having any of it. Now Moegi. It wasn't a shout, but it was said firmly enough to brook no back talk. Naruto's eyes turned to Moegi, a resigned look, but he tried to smile bravely at her. It's okay, Mo-chan. But Moegi, seeing the look in Tsunade's eyes, and the look in Naruto's, immediately knew it wasn't and wouldn't be okay. With a deep breath, Moegi did something neither expected. Moegi crossed her arms and set her feet firmly on the floor. No. Tsunade's turned to look at the kunoichi in shock before she almost stammered. What did you say? Moegi looked a little nervous, but she held firm to her resolve. No, Lady Tsunade, I won't leave Naruto-kun. He is my boss, and my boyfriend, and I won't let you hurt him. Tsunade blinked in surprise as she looked from one to the other. Is this true? She shouted at Naruto, who tried to sink further back in his chair. Homina, was all that he could say as the killer intent washed over him, but eventually his head nodded and he was able to squeak out. Yes, she's mine. Tsunade, still glaring at the boy, punched the intercom button on her desk, breaking it, then gave up as she bellowed for her assistant. Shizune. The younger kunoichi came into the office in record time, a look of shock on her face as she expected to see blood and guts everywhere, but seeing everyone and everything still intact made her pause. Yes, Lady Tsunade. Tsunade waved her arm towards the wall of Hokage pictures. Get it. Shizune blinked as she looked at the fourth Hokage's picture to Naruto, then back to the Hokage. Are you sure? Really? Tsunade nodded grimly and Shizune practically bounced to the picture and performed a few hand signs before powering chakra into it. A click was heard before the picture swung up into the ceiling, revealing a dark green bottle and 4 expensive-looking sake bowls. Shizune removed them, then bounced back over and placed them on the desk, before she happily bounced back and closed and locked the door. Both Moegi and Naruto looked confused as Shizune uncapped the bottle and poured some of the contents into each bowl. Before any bowls were touched, Tsunade glared at Naruto and Moegi. So it's true. You are boyfriend and girlfriend. Both nodded as they stared at the Hokage. And I assume you both are in love. Moegi nodded and Naruto nodded a little more slowly but was still affirmative. Tsunade took a deep breath and sighed. Reaching over, she accepted a bowl from Shizune, then waited until the others had one as well and she raised hers. Finally, Shizune nodded and repeated after the Hokage and they chugged back the contents of their bowls. Naruto and Moegi looked at each other, then repeated the toast with a shrug and drank their bowls as well. Naruto wasn't sure what brand of sake this was, but he knew it was expensive as it didn't leave the odd aftertaste that most sake left. In fact, it went down smooth and settled pleasantly in his stomach, giving him a slightly euphoric feeling. Moegi felt the same and went to sit down with a smile, but grinned happily as Naruto pulled her into his lap and she cuddled into him. Tsunade and Shizune both awed at them before Tsunade grinned. Well, let me start by saying congratulations, and I'm happy that you finally opened your eyes and found someone, Naruto. I mean, Jiraiya was sure you were gay or a eunuch. I am glad he was wrong on at least one of those counts. Moegi snickered as she kissed Naruto's chin. Both actually. Tsunade raised an eyebrow and Shizune merely shook her head with a smirk. I thought so. Tsunade cleared her throat again and all eyes focused on her. Well, Details. I need to know if he needs further education. I want my kunoichi happy, at least in that department. Shizune blinked in shock as she protested. Lady Tsunade. But the Hokage just grinned at the two. Naruto and Moegi both blushed deeply, but Moegi snuggled deeper into her boss's chest. Not necessary. The boss is awesome, she said with a happy, dreamy look on her face, and Naruto glowered at Tsunade. Bachan, I think you've been around Ero Sanin too long. With a slight frown, Tsunade got down to business. While I am happy for you both need to keep this at a dull roar. We don't mind, but there are those who will. My only other alternative, I will have to reassign one of you to another team, most likely you Moegi, since I can't really reassign Naruto. People, especially the council, would look at this as potential favoritism being played to Moegi and would not trust your judgment in anything. Naruto rolled his eyes and grumbled lowly. Yeah, like they do that now. Tsunade grumbled herself before she hit Naruto with a pencil. Be that as it may, do not give them any further fuel to use against either of you. Understood. Naruto and Moegi both sighed, then nodded to her. Naruto nodded towards the bottle with a question on his face, and Tsunade grinned this time. Oh, well, I have maintained for the longest time that you were just confused and you needed the right woman to clear your head. After a while, though, I started having my doubts. So I made a promise that if you found that woman, I would share a drink from the most expensive sake with you, Shizune, and your new significant other. Naruto frowned, but he sort of understood the logic behind it. He was glad that she was vindicated, though. The thought of following in Sasuke's footsteps did not appeal to him at all. Naruto, I expect your report on her training tomorrow morning, and leave out anything personal, understand? While I am happy for you, I don't need to have about the two of your lives in an official report. Get me? Both teens blushed before they nodded in agreement and fled from her office to spend the little time they had left together before Naruto had to take his final student out on solo training. Tsunade sighed as she poured herself another drink, and Shizune frowned at her. You didn't tell him. Tsunade shrugged before she sipped at the sake. It can wait a little longer. Let him enjoy the time he has at least. He'll know soon enough. Shizune could only nod in agreement. Responsibilities always seem to take away enjoyment. Oh. Naruto skipped all the way to his house and opened the front gate and strolled in. A good day had become even better, and he was about to have a great weekend as well. Moegi had run back to her apartment to grab some things, and planned to spend the weekend with him. Naruto thought it might be a bit much, but Moegi threatened to get on her knees and beg him right there in front of the Hokage tower, and that was enough for him to give in immediately. Not that he didn't want to spend time with his Mo-chan, he was worried that if they were seen together there would be trouble for her, and that was something he wanted to avoid at all costs. He wondered what his little one had in mind. The mischievous grin on her face as they separated made him think he was in trouble, but he liked the kind of trouble she gave him thus far, so what the hell. Naruto ran up the stairs as he walked in and grinned like an idiot as he threw his travel bag in the corner and began rifling through clothes in his dresser. They weren't going out. In fact, they were going to sit at home and cook, eat, relax, then be pervy together. Naruto liked the last part especially. And because he knew she would, when she was extremely naughty, he would happily drop her pants, put her over his knee, and listen to the doorbell ring. He frowned as he got ready to jump in the shower, and the doorbell rang again, making him grumble, and at first he was going to ignore it completely, until a familiar pounding made him grumble louder. With a resigned sigh, Naruto walked back into the entry and opened the door. Hello, Sakura-chan, what can I do for you? Sakura growled before she strode into the house. About time you opened the door, Naruto. What, didn't want to see your old teammate again? Naruto sighed in resignation. No, I was about to take a shower. I am still training my team and one of the members is coming by in a little while. Sakura gave him the fish eye, then shook her head. Well, at least you are training your team seriously. If only you were as serious in your training when we were genin. Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly as he felt a slight surge of anger. Well, there's the pot calling the kettle black, isn't it? What do you want, Sakura-chan? Sakura looked at him and shrugged before she sat on the couch uninvited. Well, it has been a while since I saw you and I was wondering what you were up to. Naruto blinked in confusion before he stared at Sakura, making her squirm. You've never cared before, why start now? Sakura looked at her hands before she shrugged, not meeting his eyes. Well, I just thought it was time for us to have a talk. You know, old friends getting reacquainted and stuff. Naruto blinked incredulously at her before he actually laughed. Sakura glowered at him, but he shook his head and shrugged as if her opinion didn't mean much. Old friends. Let me remind you that we were never friends, Sakura-chan. If we were, it was obviously one-sided, and it wasn't on your side. You said so yourself at one point, plus some other very painful words I remember clearly. Surprisingly, Sakura didn't get angry, she just looked at her fingers for a long while before she answered him in a quiet voice. Naruto, you know everyone makes mistakes. None of us are perfect. If I was perfect, then I could have probably seen things differently when I was younger, but I didn't. I made a lot of mistakes and I paid a heavy price for the ones I have made. Is it so hard for you to believe that I could have one day seen how wrong I was? Naruto thought for a moment as he looked at her, then frowned. When did you come to this conclusion, Sakura? When did you notice that you had made a mistake? Sakura grimaced as she stared down at her fingers again, refusing to look him in the eye. Well, it was last year, when. And Naruto growled lightly as he glared at her now, his eyes becoming hollow pits of anger. Wait, let me guess. When they announced I was the son of Minato Namikaze. Naruto chuckled humorlessly as he shook his head. Tell me, Sakura, was that before or after you found out that I moved into my parents' house and now had a small fortune that was held for me? Sakura looked up at him, but when she saw the hardness in his eyes, she quickly looked down again. It wasn't really my idea, my mother said. And this time Naruto threw his head back and laughed loud and long. The unmitigated gall, the infinite stupidity, Naruto couldn't believe for a second what he had heard. So your mom suddenly sees me as worthy, tells you to approach me and try to establish what? A friendship in hopes to gain more status. More money. Or is this an easy way to get my guard down so that she can try and stick a less than obvious knife in my back? Sakura sniffled and Naruto's hand clenched. Oh great, she's gonna turn on the waterworks now, thinking she's dealing with the old Naruto. Before Naruto could say anything, however, a small knock on the door made him smile in recognition as his cute one's voice rang out. Hey boss. It's me, can you come out to play? Naruto strode to the door quickly, then opened it and grabbed her with both arms and hugged her tight. Moegi blinked in surprise, then settled into the hug with a sigh as his hands cupped her bottom and held her against him. Ah, Mo-chan, you have no idea how happy I am to see you right now. Moegi smiled at him, but then her smile became a frown and almost a snarl as she spied Sakura sitting on the couch looking at them. It's not my place to ask, boss, but what's she doing here? Naruto snickered before he opened the door wider with his foot. Oh, she was just leaving. Sakura opened her mouth to say something, but Naruto's voice snapped out, making her close her mouth again. I'm not your fool, Sakura. Not anymore, and after what you told me, I'm not sure if I'm even your friend. You've been your mother's tool for some time now. I don't have time for tools, and I won't be used by you again. Sakura nodded slightly before she stood and walked to the door, but before stepping through, she put her 2 cents where they didn't belong. Aren't you robbing the cradle, Naruto? Naruto would have snapped something witty or blatant back, but Moegi beat him to it. The boss does what he wants, when he wants. We're both consenting adults, and if I take Naruto's attitude right, you're not welcome here, Haruno. I think it's time you let the door hit you where the dog should have bit you. Sakura snarled at Moegi, but Naruto shut her up instantly. Don't take that attitude with her, Sakura, she's right. You don't belong here. Not anymore. You made sure of that. Sakura turned and stabbed a finger at Moegi in her obvious anger. And she does. Naruto smirked before he rubbed Moegi's head, she still leaning back against him with her arms crossed and her hip to the right. If I choose, then yes, she does, and right now I choose. Either way, Sakura, it isn't your business. Now please leave. Sakura opened her mouth to retort, but Naruto's patience was at its end. I won't ask nicely again. Seeing the sharp look in Naruto's eyes, Sakura nodded once, then walked briskly out the door and off Naruto's property, but Naruto recognized the look on her face and knew she was going to do something underhanded. Moegi turned around and squeezed him tight, which broke his train of thought and made him smile down at her. Come on, boss, we have a weekend to waste with each other. Naruto nodded smartly before he closed the front door with one hand and picked Moegi up by her backside with the other, making her squeal in delight, legs wrapping around his waist to hold her there. Oh, I don't think the weekend will be a waste, Mo-chan, not at all. And it wasn't. Oh. Naruto stood at the front gate and waited patiently. It seemed his trainees were intent on all being late for their training, as Hanabi was now 30 minutes late. Naruto tried not to be angry, but frustration was definitely creeping in. Well, at least he had a splendid weekend with his Mo. He wanted her to sleep in, so he left the house key on the bed stand, along with a bouquet of flowers and a note letting her know how much he would miss her. Naruto took a deep breath and let it out with a pleased sigh. Sometimes life is good. Life is neither good nor bad, it just is. A hard female voice said behind him. With a frown he turned and took in one Hyuga Hanabi. Her face was cast in a scowl, and her posture said anything but, ready for the week. Naruto, still in a good mood, shook it off however. Good morning Hanabi-san, I am glad you could make it. But her voice tough small lashed out at him and made him frown. Spare me your rhetoric, it neither impresses me nor does it make the following situation any better. I was told I have to go through this training session, and I will do what the Hokage commands, but don't think for a moment that I will accept or like it. Naruto, not being very clever, thought of a quick way to deflate her and hopefully diffuse her escalating anger. Anger. Isn't that a powerful emotion for you to be showing in public, Hanabi-san? Whatever would your father say? Hanabi glowered at him before she took a couple of calming breaths. He could see the emotionless mask return to her, but she didn't say anything else. Deciding it was safe, Naruto gestured to the front gate. Shall we? Hanabi nodded once, lips pressed firmly together, and they walked into the surrounding forest. Naruto had a bad feeling about this, but then his week with Moegi had given him the same feeling. Maybe this would turn out well also. Riget. Oh. Moegi woke up with a grin on her face until her hand touched his side of the bed and she frowned. Finding it cold and empty, she looked at the clock and was about to scramble frantically to catch up to him before he was gone, when she spied the bouquet of flowers and the note next to it. Picking it up with a nervous shake, she opened it and read it, and a smile slowly formed on our face. Mo-chan, I hope I wasn't too hard on you last night, snicker, but I know how eager you have become for our snuggle sessions and how much I love them too. This has been the best week of my life, and to be honest I don't want it to end, so that is why I left you this little golden treat. It's the key to the front and back door of the house, and I give you permission to come and go as you please, just don't eat all the ramen. See you in a week, Mo-chan. Boss. Moegi looked at the key and without a word picked it up and slid it on the chain around her neck. She smelled the flowers, and put them in a vase of water, then took out some clean clothes and walked into the bathroom with a happy grin. It wasn't until she was halfway through her shower that she shrieked in glee, stomping her feet and crying at the same time. He gave me a key. I can come and go as I please. He loves to snuggle with me. And Moegi slipped and fell on her plush posterior, but made no sound of pain or protest, only loud squeals of happiness, which caused most people who walked by to stare quizzically at Naruto's house, but continue quickly on their way. Oh. Making it to camp was a lesson in pain for Naruto, as Hanabi kept grumbling just loud enough at how much of an imbecile he was, and how she was being forced to suffer under his tutelage. On and on it went, and Naruto was reaching the obvious edge of his patience. With a huff, he dropped his backpack to the ground and summoned a few clones and immediately got them to taking care of business. You wood, you tent, you water, and you food. The clones saluted smartly, then hurried to their tasks, leaving Naruto to think until Hanabi broke into his thoughts. Great. Even more imbeciles to torment me. Naruto turned and looked at her with a frown, finally fed up with the comments. Hanabi, if you have something to say then quit beating around the bush and say it. Hanabi looked at him with a frown before she snapped at him. The opposite of less on. And Naruto's brow creased in thought before a bulb came on over his head. More on. And Hanabi smirked as she nodded in satisfaction. Exactly. A few seconds later she turned and began setting up her tent, seemingly more content than before. Naruto mulled over the strange conversation for some time, not sure what she meant. More on. Less on. What the hell did she mean by that? Who? And the light bulb went off again, only this time it turned red and exploded. Why that little? Call me a moron, will she? Naruto growled angrily. If he had a tail it would be lashing the air right now, but he decided that because of Mo-chan in his life, he would try and approach this in a nicer manner than he would have in previous times. Hanabi, when you are done setting up your tent, come sit with me at the fire. Naruto didn't wait for an answer before pulled up a log and sat down. Using a simple fire jutsu, he set the logs ablaze and waited patiently until Hanabi finally approached and sat across from him, staring at him around the flames. You wanted to see me. Naruto nodded as he tossed a stick into the blaze and watched it burn. You have a lot of animosity towards me. In my memory, I haven't done anything to you to have earned that, so do you mind telling me what's up? Hanabi's face hardened as she glared at him, but her lips didn't move for a long time. With a sigh, Naruto threw another stick into the fire. Fine, you want to play this game, we will play it your way, but I guarantee by the end of the week, you will tell me. Hanabi growled loudly at him before she spat out at him. I doubt it. You may have impressed a lot of people, but you are just the baka to me. Naruto shook his head, still frowning. I really don't like that word, but have it your way, Hanabi-chan. Your training will begin in the morning, be prepared to sweat. Hanabi stood, but Naruto's voice interrupted her. I didn't say you could leave, I said your training begins in the morning. Hanabi turned to look at him, glowering in anger, but Naruto paid her no mind as a shadow clone returned with 4 rabbits cleaned and ready to cook. Naruto took them and placed them over the fire with a smile as the clone dispelled. Naruto grinned at her before he added some seasoning to the rabbits. 20 push-ups, Hanabi. Rapid fire. Hanabi blinked in surprise. I thought we started training tomorrow. Naruto merely smirked. We do, was all he said as he waited patiently for her to start. After a few seconds, Hanabi nodded, then dropped down and did 20 push-ups, but as she started to rise, Naruto shook his head. Sloppy, Hanabi-chan, do them again. Hanabi frowned but nodded and knocked out another 20, but Naruto's face was still frowning even though he wasn't looking at her. Again, Hanabi decided she would play his game and did another 20, although a little slower, and waited in that position for him to demand more. When he didn't, she stood up and brushed the dirt from her hands until his voice rang out. 20 squat thrusts, quickly. This continued for an hour before Naruto finally noticed the food was done. With a grin, he took the first rabbit and began to eat it while Hanabi continued her exercises. Naruto finished the first rabbit and started on a second one, a satisfied smirk on his face. This came out really good. Hanabi glared at him as she finished the next series. If looks could kill, well, I'm sure you know what would have happened to Naruto. Naruto had eaten a third rabbit, and one sat to the side of the fire staying warm, while Hanabi struggled now to do what Naruto commanded. Her frame, though lithe and strong, was not built for long-term exercising in this manner, and after 2 straight hours she was reaching the end of her limit. Naruto waited until she collapsed the first time, then told her to stop. Alright, Hanabi-chan, you have lasted longer than I would have expected, which is a pat on the back to your conditioning. I am glad that you are in better shape than Udon, but you have a little ways to go to catch up to Konohamaru. Naruto nodded to the rabbit that was remaining, and Hanabi slowly reached for it, but stopped as she waited to see if it was a trick or not. When Naruto didn't say anything, she picked it up and took a bite from it and sighed in pleasure. Naruto grinned as he poked the fire, then threw on another stick. I'm glad you approve. Hanabi didn't respond, but began to eat quickly as if the rabbit would get up and run from her. Naruto after a time looked up at the girl again and tried to see what her response would be this time. So is there anything you want to talk about, Hanabi-chan? Hanabi looked thoughtful for a moment, then stood and bowed deeply to him. Naruto, being an honorable person, immediately stood and returned the bow, and that was when she kicked him in the crotch. Naruto's eyes exploded open as he grabbed his now throbbing lower region and fell to his side on the ground, gurgling in pain. Hanabi finished off the rabbit and cast the bones aside before she looked at Naruto again. A ninja should never let his guard down. And his eyes followed her as she walked to and climbed into her tent. Naruto lay there for a time and wondered if it was too late to go back home.